Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the No Starving Artist podcast. I believe this is episode 36. We're moving up there. We're almost to 50. And by almost, I mean like 14 away, but that's close enough in my book. Very, very excited for today's chat. I think this is going to be a very, very important / valuable conversation for anybody that's listening that interacts with dancers at all. So that's great. As always, nsadance.com. We've got a brand new website you can check out. You can find everything about mentorship, dance critiques, clothing, the podcast, and whatever else your heart desires. So be sure to check that out and see for yourself what we got going on. But without further ado, let's jump into today's episode and find out who today's guest is. Dr. Chelsea Pierotti, welcome to the No Starving Artist podcast. How are you? And tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me. I am very excited to chat with you as well. I'm a professor, university professor, and my specialty is sport psychology, mental performance consulting for dancers. So I grew up a dancer. I grew up the studio dancer, did that whole world and circuit, and then fell in love with ballet a little late. So ended up in the professional ballet world and then decided to focus on academics. So now have my PhD in sports psychology and work as a mental performance consultant for dancers.
Incredible. I feel like this is something that is not super common. So I'm very excited to have you on the podcast because I've recently come across some dancers who actually have dabbled in using sports psychologists, but they are, gymnastics or, sort of extensions of dance. So it's really cool that you kind of have that background. And I have an immediate question for you that I just kind of thought of, because I know a lot of dancers that I have talked to sometimes struggle with abandoning dance and going to school for something else or, that type of thing. And I think it's really cool that you chose something that is still specific to dancing, but isn't necessarily the act of dancing. My question is, was that a hard decision for you to make to pursue higher education as opposed to continuing to dance? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So my freshman year of college, I was trying to do both. I was trying to stay in the professional ballet world and focus on academics and do well. Mm-hmm. And it was just clear by the end of that year that was not sustainable. And was it hard? It was a little bit, but actually by the time I really made that decision, I say I wrestled a couple months, as contracts were coming up, was I going to renew? And it really wasn't bad because I didn't know this at the time, but now I understand it from an academic sense that I am very strongly rooted in my own values. I know what matters to me and I know what I want to focus on and what kind of brings me that joy and inspiration and motivation. And I no longer felt it on stage. And I learned really early as a dancer, actually, that I preferred being backstage. I preferred, teaching class and standing in the wings and watching the little dancers rather than me being the one on stage. Yeah. So I had enough awareness pretty early to know. And even in my ballet company, I still loved class. I still wanted to be at the bar, but then actual performances didn't bring me the same joy as others around me were feeling. Yeah. So that I think awareness helped. And I have always wanted to pursue higher education. And so at first I was going to delay it, do the dance thing and come back to it. But after 1 year, it was clear that my heart was already backstage. I wanted to do that side of it. So it actually wasn't too hard by the time there's a few months of reflection. I was like, nope, this is right. I'm done.
Yeah. That makes sense. Was it always... So tell me a little bit more about your specific degree before I ask this next question.
Yeah. So my PhD is social psychology of sport. And so this field is really interesting because there are a lot of ways you can get there. Mm-hmm. So some people are what you might think of as a traditional therapist. They have like a mental health and therapy focus, a license to treat clients in their state.
Got it.
There's that side. And then there's the performance side, which is not necessarily a licensed mental health professional. They're really there to help your average person thrive and be their best. And so some people can do both and some people are, one or the other. My degree is on the positive side. So I am not a licensed mental health clinician. I'm not a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And I work with people who are kind of in that middle, maybe, feeling that performance slump or competition anxiety is getting in the way, this identity issue like you're talking about, and then helping them thrive. So
Got it.
either
Got it.
side or both.
Okay. That makes sense. And how early on did you know immediately, like, I can apply this to dance? And was that part of the reason why you chose that degree? Or was it something that developed over time for you?
I knew right away, and I also knew it was an uphill battle. As you said at the beginning, there's just not many of us. There's a
Yeah.
small subset of people now who are in performing arts. And even that, there's people who work with Cirque du Soleil, there's people who work with ballet
Right.
companies, people who work with orchestras. And so there's just that small subset where, like, there's not many of us. And so I knew it was going to be harder to kind of fight for that and that respect of dancers or athletes. And I've always firmly felt that they are athletes. Whether or not as a sport is actually, to me, a separate question.
Yes, I agree.
Athletes. And so I knew it all applied, but all of the research is kind of on the traditional sport. It's on the, all the big sports. And so being able to convert it to dance has been part of the fun. So I did know right away that it would apply. I didn't know it's what I wanted to do though. So I was going the more clinical route and then was like, nope, never mind. I don't like this. And I coached. So I coached a high school team for 12 years. And that brought up the coaching side of things and the leadership. And that passion led me to discover that sports psychology was even a field.
Yeah.
And then once I found it, it was like, oh, all the pieces came together. This is what I'm supposed to do.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So describe to me just kind of in the realm of dance, your clients in a nutshell. Who's coming to you? What are they commonly struggling with? Or what are they, what prompts them to be like, I feel like I need this type of service?
Sure. I mostly am with, I would say, middle school to college. I will talk to parents of children younger than that. And the challenge with mental skills, much younger than about 12, is it's more about the teacher and the parent than it is the child.
Yeah.
And just from an awareness place, right? They're just not cognitively ready for that. So I usually put a lower level at about middle school. I would say the majority of my clients are high school or early college, making that transition to college, trying to figure out how to make that happen. Yeah. Or, that transition to LA or New York in the professional side through early 20s. A lot of the themes are around a couple things. So there's either the lack of motivation, burnout, performance slump side of things, or the anxiety, that I can nail it in the studio, but then as soon as I'm on stage, it falls apart. And it's more about that recovery from mistake.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. The age thing makes a lot of sense as well. My mentorship that I do is a lot lighter than probably the things that you're dealing with, because it's much more focused on the dance side of things, just their actual dancing, and their performance at comps and things like that. But I realized really quickly that there was definitely an age fall off where it was like, okay, this isn't really super valuable at this point.
Right.
So that totally makes sense. And when it comes to the anxiety component, because I see this a lot. These are a lot of the questions that I'm getting. These are a lot of the things that I'm seeing when I go into studios. And in my experience, it's been driven by comparison, which I think is something that is a huge thing in just the world in general right now. And I always sort of, explain that when I was coming up, you would see those great dancers, you would see those incredible 1%ers, but it would be once in a while, at a convention or on stage at a show, and you would get that moment of inspiration, and then you'd go back to your studio and be able to kind of work towards that. Whereas now a lot of these dancers are able to kind of, refresh the screen and see that 1% in front of them all day long. How big of a thing is that in your opinion, in your experience, and where do you even start with sort of unraveling that for dancers?
You're right. I think comparison is at the root of a lot of dancers' challenges. And there's the side of it where we know with just the brain and development, comparison is at its worst from about 12 to 16.
Mm.
So that's where most dancers are trying to find themselves and figure out, what is my style? What am I good at? What do I want to pursue? So it naturally is just rough at that age anyway. I do think social media makes it much, much worse. I grew up similarly where yes, I had that inspiration, but they're not in your face every day. Or, you had a bad day at the studio and then you just scroll and feel even worse every day. So from what to do and where to start, I do really like to talk to dancers about social media. And I understand that many of them are not just going to shut it off, right? I will talk to even an elite high school or college team to say what would it look like if you didn't have your phone the 24 hours before that event, and they panic. So even just trying to pull back of could you just not have that input in your life for that short time? And just telling them to shut it off doesn't work. But talking through when you do scroll and watch these dancers, how do you feel? Because you can use comparison for inspiration and it can be exciting. So are you able to watch and say, oh, that move is really cool. I want to go try that. Or I love her performance quality. I want to look at that. Or does it just make you feel icky? Yeah. And if it is causing that feeling, do you have the awareness to shut it off? So there's kind of a therapy approach to this, but it's like a choice point of every day you have lots of choices to make. What am I wearing? What am I going to eat today? How do I call this person? Little tiny choices all day. And it's about the awareness to say, is this choice helping me be the person I want to be? And a lot of times we are just doing that automatically. We're not paying attention. And so it's the awareness to say, I want to be this kind of dancer. I want to be this kind of person. So then is this behavior helping me? And even if it's not social media, if it's I'm standing in the back at convention, I'm scared, I don't know how to put myself out there, everybody's better than me, all these negative thoughts are spiraling, is the behaviors, your choices that day, are they helping you or are they hurting you? And knowing that you have a lot of choice. Because I think a lot of teenagers are just they feel like they're along for the ride. My parents tell me something, my teachers tell me something. You actually have a lot of choice in here about to help make that comparison better, because it's not going to go away. It's about what is in your control to either reduce how much you're seeing it or how you respond to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Based off of that, then, how important is it for dancers to kind of know what they're working towards, whether that takes the shape of a formal goal or whether that takes the shape of just sort of something that they have in their mind? How important is it for them to have that sort of North Star? And do you see dancers struggling with making that decision?
I do see that struggle. And I think it's both a larger value North Star and an actual goal that you're working towards. So it's both. So when I talk about values, having a young dancer understand their own values, they may not be there yet. I think we can't usually articulate them until our 20s and 30s. But you can talk about it's that question, what kind of person do I want to be? Am I the kind of person that has everything ready for rehearsal and shows up on time? How do I want people to see me? Yeah. Right. And that you can kind of wrap your head around. I want to be the person that implements feedback right away. I want to be the person that is celebrating my teammates after their solos, being able to have that North Star. Who do I want to be? And then the goals is also really valuable because it's about defining success. And I think this comes to a lot of my work is what is success to that dancer? Because there may be an objective outcome. Success is making this college team, getting a job in LA, being a Rockette, whatever they have as their big picture end goal. But that goal may be years away. So how do we translate that to today? What do I do in today's class that gets me to that goal? Gotcha. What do I do at this convention? What's the goal of this convention this week? I'm not just going to show up and, rote repetition, do the same thing again. What am I trying to get out of this week that will help me to that thing that's 4 years away? And so it's that sense of success that's back to what's in my control? What can I do? So when students will talk about maybe their convention goal is to get a scholarship, it's okay, well, that actually is not in your control. somebody else is making that choice,
Hmm.
right? You don't get to decide. Like, so what is in your control that would contribute to that? So then it's about setting a goal for convention that's like, what's in your control that would make that outcome most likely?
Yeah.
Right. And then you do all those things so that at the end of convention, if you don't get the scholarship, you can say, okay, but I did everything in my control to show up as my best, and it just wasn't my time, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So you don't have the same kind of shutdown of like the negative thoughts that happen when you don't reach your goals. But if your goals are not in your control, that's when that comparison and negativity and everything gets so much worse.
That makes sense. There's so many things that I have swirling around in my head in terms of what I want to ask you, but I'm curious if you run into, there's a post that I've been wanting to make around this sort of punny idea that parents shouldn't overwork their dancers, and not from the standpoint of parents pushing their dancers too hard, but from the standpoint of parents wanting it more than their dancers do.
Yep.
How do you advise the dancers that you work on that deal with a situation like that, on how to deal with a situation like that and how to kind of manage, and maybe not even parents, maybe even teachers. I mean, I know when I was a younger teacher, I definitely wanted it much more than my dancers did. And to the point where I don't think it was super, super effective. So how do you sort of go about advising kids on how to deal with those types of scenarios?
Yeah. It's hard with the kids if the pressure and the negative environment is not about you, if it is your teachers or your parents. So I advise the dancers to, if they can, have that honest conversation. And this is challenging because there's certainly parent dynamics or teacher dynamics where the child actually doesn't have an opportunity to have that conversation. It's not a safe place to do so. But I would say the majority of the time, those parents that want it more are the kind of parent that actually does want to hear from you. And so what I see from parents a lot is like the young child at some point said something about how I want to be that dancer. I want to be on stage. And then the parent, very well meaning, is like, I'm going to do everything it takes to make sure my child reaches their dream. But the child's dream may have changed in the last 10 years, but the parent is still on the train of this is exactly what I'm going to do. And for the, now 15-year-old to say, hey, mom, I don't know. Like, I love this and it's fun, but I don't want to dance in college. I just want to enjoy this. And being able to hear that. And so what I advise parents and dancers to do is to have like an annual check-in. Why do we dance? What is this about for us and our family? What does this mean to us? Because it is a family investment in every way. So having that annual check-in. So as a child, being able to ask your parent, like, could we do a check-in before everything starts up again next year about, what do you love about this? What's harder for you? How can we make this better? What do we want out of this? And with the hope that the parent hears them and listens. And again, you can't control that, but you can ask. And most parents would want to hear if the thing you were fighting for was not what your child wants anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. There's a sentiment that I come across a lot, specifically in studios, on the studio side of things, where teachers are struggling with this idea from their perspective that kids are not as motivated or don't care as much about what it is that they're doing nowadays. What's your opinion on that? Do you think that that's a valid thing? Are you seeing something else from your perspective?
Yeah.
And if so, what is that?
It is valid, and psychological research supports it. We're seeing it in so many domains. We see it in academics. We see it in traditional sport. It is a thing. So if you're feeling that, you're not alone. It's definitely out there. And I think there's some support and evidence of where that's coming from is larger culture shifts and parenting shifts. And as teachers, we're always just along for the ride as parenting culture changes, right? So like the kinds of kids who show up are in response to parenting changes, and parenting styles, like they ebb and flow and they fluctuate every 15 to 20 years. And you see this like pendulum swing of parenting styles that goes back and forth. And I think we are coming back down from one of the peaks of more relaxed and the parenting styles that are a little bit more permissive and whatever you need, and I'll make everything happen for you. But it's coming back because enough people are like, this is hard. Like we have kids who won't show up and who won't do the work. And how do we find this middle ground of not being too permissive and not being overly, authoritarian, my way or the highway? What's that middle? So I guess all that to just validate that it's real and it's happening. And so there are a lot of kids who are in that place right now. So for teachers, for parents, then becomes, what do you do about that? How do you help them find it? And I think it depends on where you're at and like how much of a role you have in that child's life, right? And what you can do about it. I think a teacher and a parent are in a very different place for that. But for parents who are struggling to find that middle ground, right? It's that place of like, I want my child to be happy. I want my child to thrive. I want them to win. I want them to be in such a good mood when they, leave class tonight. But that well-meaning parent then also removes all challenges from their child's life, right? And tries to say, any roadblock, anybody who's mean to you, anybody who, the teacher that says, maybe you're not good enough for a solo this year, we'll try for next year. Like any teacher who gives them feedback about their quality of dancing that may be perfectly accurate, but to the parent, it's like, no, that wasn't what I wanted to hear. The automatic reaction is to say something's wrong with that teacher. You are perfect. You are amazing. You can do whatever you want. That teacher doesn't know. And you feel like that's boosting self-esteem, but it's not. It's actually harming their self-esteem and their confidence. And so we now have a generation of that's what's happened. We have this generation of kids whose well-meaning parents tried to boost them up so much that they now actually don't believe they're capable of anything.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, really interesting. I don't think, backing up, I don't think I've ever thought about the fact that teachers, in a sense, sort of have to mirror or, in your words, ebb and flow with the style of parenting. I don't know that I've really ever thought about that component at all. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I think your actionable at the end there makes a lot of sense as well in terms of, that's all great, but then what? How do we actually kind of overcome this? And yeah, I mean, I see that as well. I see, varying scales of that. Here in Utah, we have a trend that's taken place over the past few years where if people are upset with their studio, they just leave and open a new studio.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, well, I don't know that that's really the solution here, but it's a choice. It's a choice.
Sure.
So yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's true. I think, and I think I, as well as a lot of other, dance influencers in the space, contribute to the amount of conversations happening around dance now, and I think in a sense contribute to the empowerment of parents to be like, okay, wait, I'm starting to understand this thing of dance a little bit more. So how do I navigate it? Yeah. But it makes perfect sense, kind of what you're describing in terms of how that's carrying over into the classroom and kind of what's happening on that end.
For sure.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting to think about.
Yeah. Well, and we know with parents that it's like they mean well, but they don't think about the long-term outcome. So I'm trying to protect my 8-year-old from feedback that I feel like is hurting her feelings.
Yeah.
But if you constantly do that, then you have the 16-year-old who can't take any feedback about anything. And then you have the 25-year-old trying to have their first job and, their boss giving them corrective feedback about their work, and they fall apart.
Yeah.
And so asking parents that bigger question of like, what kind of adult do you want your child to be? Like, what's the North Star for you as a parent? What kind of person do you want them to be? And parents will inevitably say, like, I want them to be, mentally strong. I want them to go for their dreams. I want them to work hard and fight for what they want in the world. And so what does that look like when they're a child? How do you help build that skill now?
Yeah.
And for a lot of teachers, we are now the teacher we're the first person to do that for them. We're the first person to say, you're not at your goal yet. I believe you can get there, but it's going to take some hard work, and you have to be willing to listen and try and keep fighting when it's hard. Do you want that? And many of them will, but it may be the first time they've really been challenged in that way, which is, I think that's what's new for us as teachers. that were like, wait, I'm the first
Yeah.
one to do that?
Yeah. And I think the communication aspect is different as well.
Sure.
Like when I first started teaching, it was just kind of like, it was still that older sentiment of like, you do what I say because I'm your teacher and I told you to do it.
Yeah.
And I feel like now there's a much larger communication component that has to be in
Mhm.
play in order for me to get the same result. The kids have to really understand why I'm
Yeah.
asking them to do something and what the purpose is before
Mhm.
they'll be even remotely responsive to it.
Yeah, it has to tie a lot more into, why it matters and why do I care? And
Yeah.
how does this help me? From the most micro level of like, why does this adagio matter? Like,
Yeah.
why do I have to worry about it? Why does, showing up for this extra tech class that I don't want to do? Yeah, it has to come back to their why. We definitely, it sounds like grew up in a very similar place of like, you
Yeah.
just show up and do the work and you dare question what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
part's very different. But I think that healthy communication can be really good. Like
I agree.
it's a positive shift,
Yeah.
but it is different.
For sure. For sure.
Mhm.
A slight pivot. Another thing that I come across a lot, and I think that this is something that a lot of people would resonate with is, and I've heard multiple terms for it. I like this term of like, always the bridesmaid and never the bride, or, that idea of like, you're always right there. You're always second place, or,
Mhm.
you're fifth out of the top four, or whatever the situation is. And for me, I know like sometimes I even struggle when I get presented with that issue from a dancer. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, good luck, I guess. Like, because it's hard. It's hard to really kind of internalize. Like, to them, it's the world, and to me, I'm just like, I mean,
Yeah.
the second place is still great, but
Right.
when it happens over and over, how do you kind of manage that as a dancer? How do you
Yeah.
manage? At what point do you? Because I feel like it inevitably always gets to the point where it's like, okay, I'm just clearly not good enough, but then they don't necessarily have the perspective of like all the people that are behind them
Oh, sure.
that would just love to be where they are.
Yeah. So I think you exactly hit it. There's those two pieces of it's how you define success and how you perceive yourself.
Mm.
And so most dancers in that position will only start to look ahead of them. They only
Mm.
see, okay, I'm fifth, but these four are so much better than me and I'll never catch them.
Mm.
But they don't see 6 through 10.
Yeah.
They don't
Yeah.
see the people behind them. And so working on that is about the frame of reference of success is internal. So if my solo was fifth again, or I was, second for the third time in a row, was anything better about today's performance compared to 2 weeks ago?
Mm.
Like what got better in my performance?
Yeah.
And setting those goals, like, okay, I want to, work on a specific skill. I'm working on a quality of movement. I'm working on my performance. And the outcome of that also can't be judge based because we know how much that can change from event to event. So still like take that feedback and appreciate it, but your success has to be up to you.
Mm.
And so that happens in the classroom, that happens after, every competition and convention on the way home when you talk about what was good about today, what didn't go so well, what do I want to be better for next time? Like what's that control? And then helping them see the bigger picture and that kind of comparison. Because it is true that their frame of reference is very small. And so for us as adults, we're like, yeah, but like you said, second is incredible. And I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, but I'm not.
Yeah.
And as a parent or a teacher, we want to brush it off and be like, but just be happy. You should be so happy with second. And if they're not, they're not. And so it's like, okay, if you're not happy with second, what do we think is missing? And then what's in your control to fix that? So is there something about your dancing that is not reaching that peak yet?
Yeah.
What is that? How do we do that? Do we need to add some strength training? Do we need to add some privates on this style that you don't have the training in? Do we like what would actually help? Because what happens is we get on this hamster wheel of like, I just do it again and I do it again and I do it again. And I hope for something to change. And it's repetition will help a little bit, but it's not really going to change.
Yeah.
And so it's taking that control to see the growth. And then to your point about looking backwards, I help dancers like intentionally look backwards. And the value of today's generation is how much video they have of themselves that like we didn't have. So I'm like, film your solo the day you learned it. Film that group routine the first week you're cleaning it. And then when you get in the nitty gritty of competition season and you don't feel like things are getting better, look back, look at 2 weeks ago,
Mm.
look at a month ago, and try to highlight what is actually getting better
Yeah.
and intentionally doing that reflection. And it goes back to the why. You're like, oh, okay, so we're cleaning this section again because it's not there yet. But when we did the same intense cleaning on the other section, look what happened to that from a few months ago. So give it back to the why, back to like, yes, this is not always the fun part, but it's worth it
Yeah.
if we want that outcome. So
Yeah.
it's that reality gap where dancers are like, I want that thing, but they won't examine what it takes to get there. And so it's helping them find that. What will it take to get there? And are you willing to do it? And also to the parent, like your child, to the opposite of that, right? The child that might be like, I'm not actually willing to do what it takes to be at the top because I don't want to train that many hours.
Yeah.
I don't want to be homeschooled. I don't, whatever that level is.
Yeah.
Right. And having that recognition of like, that's cool too. What do you
Yeah.
want? And are
Yeah.
you doing the work for what you want?
Yeah. That's an interesting point. That was a big shift for a dancer that I was working with recently. They kept getting upset about these certain things that were happening in their classes, and then we just took a look at like what their goals were that we had set for them at the beginning when we started meeting, and I was just kind of posed the question of like, do these things that you're getting upset about even align with what your end goal is? And very quickly they were just like, no, not really. Like, I don't know why I'm getting upset. And
Right.
But it's understandable. I want to kind of future predict here as sort of a fun game. What do you feel like? Because to me, I feel like dance is starting to mirror and almost catch up to other traditional sports. I'm kind of in the same pool as you with, I do believe dancers are athletes, but I think the sport conversation is much more nuanced.
Yeah.
But I think the structuring, the approach, the hours, everything is starting to mirror and mimic other sports that have been, sports for longer.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you see the future of dance training look like? I'm a big fan of supplemental training, like working with people like yourself and working with, other areas. But I'm curious if you feel like that is where dance training is moving towards. Is that going to be something that's exclusive to the top of the spectrum? And just kind of your general thoughts on where you see dance moving from a training standpoint.
I think it is moving to be more in line with some traditional sports. And some of that is because we have a generation of parents who lived it. And this is kind of the first time that's happening. So we have, like me, I have an 8-year-old daughter who's now just starting to dance. Yeah. And so we have a generation of parents who were like, oh no, I get this. I know what my child needs. I know how early to start. I know how to rhinestone. I know how to fake eyelashes. I know like where other sports that had been true for generations, right? Yeah. So I think that part is changing because then the strategy around it is changing. And parents will do more intense classes, or we understand, yes, I need conventions. Yes, I need ballet every week, even if I'm in other styles. Yes, I want to cross-train styles. So what I see about the training, I agree in cross-training physically, whether that be across dance styles, but even more so on the strength training side. Yes. And I think that's been the biggest shift that I love to see is taking better care of our bodies from a physical training of like, you are an athlete. That cross training applies no matter what style you're in. So the strength training being really powerful, whether that's done in the studio, there's some wonderful people doing it like within the studio, or if it's more, outside weightlifting, strength training, kind of thing. Yeah. And then the other supplemental stuff, I agree, because we also have now a generation of professionals who have taken their dance expertise into these different niches, whether it's mental performance consulting or nutrition or career consulting. Like you have experts now who can help in a way that we definitely didn't used to. And we didn't have that. And the accessibility of the online access to that, that you can find the professionals, even if they're not in your small town, that you have more of that access. So yeah, I think of cross training physically, and then I would like to think mentally, and the awareness of what mental performance and mental toughness is. In the last, I would say 10 years, I've seen that shift. I used to have to explain what mental toughness is and why it matters, like why that training is important. And now I feel like I don't have to explain it anymore. People come wanting the help. So the awareness has changed. Yeah. And I think the same thing is happening with the physical training. There's an awareness of like, oh, I'm missing that. I need to go find it. Yeah. So
The parent component is so interesting.
yeah.
Again, just something that I would have never thought about because, yeah, I mean, even just naturally from the world of dance growing, you're
Yeah.
going to ultimately end up with more crossover between parents and people that have done the thing before.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think you're so right that, yeah, if you've done it, you kind of have a better understanding of what does work and what doesn't work. And so yeah, that's very, very interesting because we're seeing a huge push of like independent dancers and dancers sort of piecemealing their training together.
Yeah.
Um, and it's sometimes, I mean, I never try to take a hard stance one way or the other because it's just not, I think
Mhm.
everything's different for every person, but sometimes it's hard to argue with
Yeah.
that option because there is, a lot of benefit from being able to kind of pick and choose what you're doing and cater it to what exactly you want to do. So
Right.
it's a very interesting
Agree.
concept.
It is nuanced. You're right, because it's not an obvious better or worse.
Hmm.
I think what I would advocate for, regardless, is that there is some mentor in your life. And
Yeah.
if you are in a place where your studio director is that person and is that kind of well-rounded advice and support and
Mm,
understands the world and can help you get to what you want, wonderful.
mm,
If you don't feel like you have that, or they are pushing a dream that's not yours,
hmm,
then you might need to piecemeal and find
hmm.
advice and mentorship in other places, or both for that matter. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
you could definitely have more than one. And I think that's what's shifted with the generation too, because a lot of, I mean, I'll speak to my business. A lot of what I have created is what I wish I had. And it's
Yeah,
not that
for
my
sure.
studio director was a bad like my studio director was wonderful and I learned
Yeah.
so much from her, but we didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now that we do, it's like, okay, let's find that advice and support.
Of
And
course.
yeah.
This was going to be my follow-up question is how important do you feel having a third party voice in your
Mhm.
training is? That's kind of outside
Yeah.
of your immediate world when it's a perfect example. Like if you are really close to your studio or you just are in a studio that you like or maybe you don't like it, whatever, how important do you feel like it is to have someone that's outside of that
Yeah.
to be able to go to?
I think it's really valuable because no matter how well trained a teacher is, we start to have our own biases, especially if we've known a child for a long time.
Mm,
So I think teachers are more aware and we're better at it. But if we get to like, oh, that child is really good at that style and that
yeah.
child struggles with this style.
Yeah.
And then maybe it's been 3 years and they're actually a lot better, but you haven't seen it in a while. Um, and again, usually not intentionally, we're just live, eat, and breathe it. And we're with these kids all the time. And
Yeah.
we start to pigeonhole what they're good at and what they're not. And it's just always helpful to have that outside. And that's where like quality judging makes such a big difference too, when you can
Right.
have an outside opinion from a quality judge who can help you see, like they might highlight something that a studio owner is like, oh, I hadn't thought about. You're right. That is something that they're better at that I should
Yeah.
highlight in a future performance. And I hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
So yes, I think an outside perspective uh, is always valuable. And especially if a dancer can still be rooted in their own values. This is
Hmm.
the challenge of like, you still know who you are and what you want. And then you can take opinions from people you trust
Mm,
and still filter through, okay, what am I taking from that? What am I leaving from that? What
yeah.
matters? And what do I want?
Yeah.
What happens is the downside of the too many mentors is everybody's giving you too much advice and you're
Hmm.
trying to people please all of it. And none of it is what you want anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's fair. My last sort of thing that I would love to get into is there any like recent or current research or studies that are being done that are interesting to you when it comes to the field of dance?
there's so many great things. We're getting there. Uh, I will say there's not as much on the mental side, and that has been
Mm,
challenging. There's a few great research labs in the UK that are
okay.
actually really focused on dance on that mental wellness side.
Yeah.
And the ones on the wellness side are also usually more on the mental health. So looking more at like clinical levels of anxiety,
Gotcha.
eating disorders, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, research wise, we're slowly getting into more performing arts focused. There's a lot of great research on the dance science and like medical side.
Mm,
So focusing on uh, whether that be like hypermobility, whether that be, like the joint health, the just, foot and ankle health and understanding, like
yeah.
taking that medical professional who actually understands point work
Mm-hmm.
and being able to link those together is
Yeah.
amazing. Physical therapists who were one-time
Yeah.
wonderful, talented dancers that are now physical therapists.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of like dance medicine growing.
Yeah.
Again, it's the generation of people who did it and have now
Right.
found a career, like you said, about dance, even though I'm not on stage anymore.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of science around it that is more physical, but we're working on it.
I love that.
More of that mental side.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. As kind of in a closing, shall we say, the dancer that is out there listening, or the parent that's out there listening, that's like, okay, I get it, I'm on board, I'm with it, and whether or not they decide to seek out help from someone like yourself or not, what's an actionable thing that they can start today that would make a difference in their dance training?
Sure. I think today you could start with the reflection, the awareness of, why do I love this? Why do I keep showing up? Or the other question to that is like, what about dance still brings me joy? Like, when am I my happiest? And are you your happiest in certain classes? And then if that's true, is it about the teacher? Is it about the style? Is it about your friends that are with you in that class? Are you your happiest when you win? Okay, why is that? Where is that coming from? Are you your happiest when your teacher says you did a good job?
Yeah.
Like, just trying to find that, where are you right now with your sense of success and your sense of joy in dance? Because then you can build your goals, build your plan and everything from there.
I love that. I love that. I have one more. I lied.
I love it. Keep going.
Do you what is your perspective, opinion, do you advocate for when dancers are like, or even parents are like, my kid needs to be on social media, they need to have a strong presence on social media as a dancer? Where do you lie on that much broader conversation?
Oh boy.
Is it necessary? Is there a safe way to navigate it? That type of thing.
Yeah. Okay. So I am a little of two minds on this. So I think from a business career place, I understand the value of it. And I have enough people on the business side where your online presence will impact future connections. I get that. So that is real. The psychology researcher mother in me, I wish it didn't exist. And I wish people were never on it at all. So to me, I think, as a parent, if you want to run your child's account for the sake of creating that business focus that they might need, okay, if you feel that is really valuable, there is so much research, especially for young girls, that social media before 16 is incredibly detrimental.
Wow.
And most kids are on it well before that.
Yeah.
So it's knowing for yourself, and every parent has to make their own choices. And I just would advocate, like, the science is very clear that anything before 16 will hurt their kind of emotional development, their social development, it's their sense of self. Because again, that age is all about, who am I and how do I stand up in the world?
Yeah.
And back to our very first question, if they're stuck on looking at what everybody else is doing, it's really hard for them to not get sucked into the negative side. So yeah, that's kind of my two minds. I get that it needs to be a thing, and but the very strong psychological research, anything before 16 is setting up for a lot of challenges that we can prevent.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic answer. Thank you so much. This has been so amazing, and I really, really hope anybody listening, feels the same and got a little piece of something out of this conversation. Tell people where they can find you. Do you have availability to work with more dancers at the moment? Tell us a little bit about that side.
Yeah, Sure. Thank you so much for having me too. It's been really fun. I have my own podcast. So if you are interested in this mental health performance side, it's called Passion for Dance. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts, or passionfordancepodcast.com. You can go into the archives. We're into the 200s now. So lots of great information as teachers or parents or dancers yourselves. And then availability wise, a little bit, yes. So I have, my professor life is really my full-time job, but I love working with dancers and staying kind of in touch with what's really happening right now. So yes, please reach out.
I love that. I love that. And all of Chelsea's links will be in the description. So if you're listening to this or watching this, be sure to hop down there and check out, even if it's just watching the podcast or, the other resources that you put out, all amazing things. So thank you so much again. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was wonderful.